Okay, so the purpose of this video is to demonstrate that at least one can use an emulator from Android Studio and build it in Unity, build an app in Unity, and then get Unity to transfer it to a running emulator. So first off, you need to make sure you've got Android Studio installed, and under Android Studio it has a tools menu, and we'll just wait for that to open. Here we go. So this is the first step. Once this is loaded, it's just loading my last app. So I go to Tools, and on Tools you should have an Android menu. If you don't have an Android menu, you're going to have to find out how to get rid of to make this and get this going. The tool we're after is the Android VD, the Virtual Device Manager, which is that one. And that will be the tool that we use to, or I've been using to create and run emulators. The x86 emulator is probably the best. In order to get hold of one of these, you just select download and then it's got it ready to go. So I'm going to use this one, which has got an x86 image on it. It goes much faster on our x86 machines. So I'll start that one. Just minimize that. Now that takes a wee while to go. Oh, it's going quite fast. So now I'll just demonstrate on this particular example the transfer of the app into the Android device. So just before we do that, we'll just check. Okay, this has still got copies of the previous one on it. So I'm just going to go up and install that. Yep, so okay. Make sure it's not installed. Good, it's not there. All right. So our next task is to head back into the Unity environment. This one's a tester I made, and what I did was I tested the app by the transfer to Android first by not including the SQLite plugins folder, and then I included the plugins folder from the SQLite library, as well as including the database scripts that we have. The thing to be aware of is that you also need a streaming assets folder, which is where the database will be stored on the local machine when you test it locally. So this particular example is a little bit of just a test. What I've done here is I've used the concept of reactives. So this is a reactive style approach. I've added a text scroller that I wrote myself, and it does it too fast, so I have to fix it up at some stage. And I've added the create.db script to the app. I've noticed that both of these are actually connected to parts of the game as they are there. So to test it locally or on the local machine, we just hit go, play. Ta-da, away it's gone. Notice that we also have our nice console output as well. Okay, so stop that. Now I want to run this or transfer it to the Android device, which is going to be ready to go shortly, I hope. Get back to the screen, and I want to build and put that on the Android device. So first we'll go to Build Settings, select Android, and you can get it to detect device or find compatible devices. It's found the one that's running before, but let's just go all compatible devices for now. So first thing here I need to do is check player settings. For Android, you've got to go and check that you've got your identifier set. And I've selected a minimum, pretty much the lowest API level I could find on the system, which is that one as a sort of minimum, and automatic on here. The other thing that was a bit tricky is these two weren't necessarily ticked, so I had to tick the target architecture. And that was all I had to do there. The other thing you need to do is go into the plugins that you've got from the SQLite folder, Android and libraries, and check that the system knows what to do with these libraries and when to use them when they're building. So click on that, and the inspector in this case knows that it's going to look at where that plugin is going to be used. So I think it was a bit tricky in the current version. If you click any platform, this becomes an exclude list. If you leave it as it is, it's an include list. So we want the code library to be, or DLL, to be available on Android if it's an ARM machine. So there's the ARM platform. And we want the x86 to be available also, and it's for the x86 machine. And in here, x64 should only be for the editor, or if we're going to stand alone. And x86 is similar. We're on an x64 machine. So the other place I needed to go was into my scripts to check my database code. I've just used the create DB and the data source objects. The thing that was a bit tricky is that the create DB script, which I'll open now, has a path built into it, which you have to create in order to run the system. So when you're testing it, you've got to make sure you've got the streaming assets folder in your machine, on your machine. So that's the thing I've done. So test mine. So testing it locally again just goes, so notice here I've got my assets folders, and in assets folders I've added a folder called streaming assets that gets the test code gets the database connection object gets put in there. So I'll run that, and ta-da, it's going and it's running this, which is a very funky text scroller, very fast text scroller. All right, so I want to send that to the other machine. I've done my build settings, player settings. I just double check those again. I've got New Simland as my company. I'm calling it default company here. We'll call that New Simland. It's called the product test Android. And that's now okay. So the next thing I want to do is build. So you just click build now. It's asking me where I want to put it. It's putting it into the same folder as my test Android folder. Yes, I'll do that. Now, if it fails on detecting Android SDK, you'll need to reinstall your Unity with the right SDK as well, so that you've got Android SDK with your Unity. This is using the Gradle tool set or tool chain to produce the APK. APK is the Android app package, and to me it seems a bit slower. You can actually select a different building tool, which is the Unity one that seems a bit faster. I'm using Gradle because it seems to be quite well. It's used with the Android Studio as well. Now back to this thing that is now built, and it's given us the resulting package. So that's all very well. So in theory, I can just drag that and drop it on here, and it should do that. Here it is, it's installed. So how do I test that? I'll go to my app and double click on it, or click on it, and get this comes up, and there you are, the app is now on the Android emulator. So I'm going to remove that from there. Oops. Remove that from there, like this, I hope, and install it. There we go. Now the other thing you can do is you can get it to build and run it. So I should be able to go build and run. We'll go through the same process again, but this time it will try to actually put it directly on the device that it's identified as being an Android device that's connected to this machine in the right way. So just watch that. It all takes a bit longer. So what it does when you do build and run is it installs it and runs it straight away. Although it's taking a bit of time to build it at the moment. Now it's trying to copy it across, and away it goes. There we go. So it's gone straight across to the emulator. This will be built and installed into a device you've got connected if you selected the correct device. There we go. There's our app. Hooray! Okay, so that's how to do that. And that's the demo I tried to do yesterday. I wanted to check as well under preferences that I have my correct external tools. So you'll notice here I have the paths to my Android SDK and into my JDK. Something I had to fiddle with a little bit was making sure these slashes were around the right way. Don't seem to be causing any trouble at the moment though, so that's all good. Okay, so that's the end of the recording. Hopefully we can see this 12 minutes.